today I'm especially pleased to be joined by a good friend, Keith Bowen, Chief Revenue Officer for Altice USA and A4. And Keith, there's so much to unpack about your role and your responsibilities at Altice. One of the things that I know about you is that you're a foodie. You
Yeah.
love food, you love to cook, you love to watch TV shows about food. So rather than jumping right into the business, what I'd really love to do is just hear how the pandemic has impacted on your love and passion for food, knowing that you're home more, probably able to cook more. So tell me a little about that.
No, thanks, Jack. It's good to see you as always. Yeah, food's always been my passion, home and food, in fact. But during the pandemic, one of the things that we do share and I do love is my family's home. And I love cooking for them. And we're doing that probably on average 6 nights a week. So,
And your family is, tell me a little about this, how many kids you have and
so I have 3 kids. I have 2 older boys, Jack, who is graduated and has been
good
living
name.
with me. Yep, dude, great name, very strong name. Jack's been living with us either in the city prior to the pandemic, and now we're out east on the island since. And Jack probably wouldn't be living with us had it not been for the pandemic. So it's been lovely to have him around. He's really changed since college. Long story short, but it's good to kindle with your son, as he's grown up. And we do celebrate food. And James, who is at Fairfield as a senior, is back and forth quite a bit. He also is around. And then, recently we brought Quinn Bowen into the fray. A big gap between the two, but I always wanted a daughter.
Congratulations. She just a few months ago, right?
Just 5 short months ago. And
Wow.
it has been quite the journey just to get to that moment in time 5 months ago. Well overdue. But, Jack, you look at your children through the same lens, yet it's different, right? As a more mature man and a father of 2, adding a third to the mix, I just felt I was more present, more mature, able to handle it very differently. So it's made kind of 2 different chapters. My life is complete. Again, it's something I always wanted later in life than I expected. But I've got a great, loving family, and my boys have welcomed her into our lives without any reservation. I think at first they thought it was nuts, but you know, you allow the situation to marinate, and then the baby arrives, and then everything changes, right?
Yeah.
It's immediate family. They've been nothing short of supportive, so it's been fantastic. So that's family, and then there's food, and
So, so other than warming up the baby food,
yeah.
what's your favorite meal to cook?
Jack, I can basically cook almost anything. And the reason I say that is I started cooking because most of my parents worked and my brothers didn't have an interest in it. So, before my mom or dad could get home, I would just take the initiative to start. And of course, I wasn't very good. But through high school and college, I worked in the restaurant industry and rose in that industry during the summers and sometimes during the school year to a head chef job.
Really?
Um,
Where were you a head
it
chef?
was out. The head chef job was out in Fire Island, in Ocean Beach.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, many years ago. And I would say our food was good. In the resort environment, they never aspired to be A plus. Back then, they didn't. They just aspired to serve heavy cocktails and B plus food, in my recollection. But it taught me a lot about my passion of food, food serving, food preparation, and by the way, and timing. And the ability to multitask in a restaurant when you're serving 400 covers in a busy night, that really prepared me for real life.
I'm curious to what you have to say to those young people, and especially the diverse young people in our community today who feel they want a lot of experiences,
Yeah.
but who we also feel should be getting more just the pure experience within our business.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to get your start, right? I mean, there's nothing like you can study all you want, you can be super book smart, but until you actually go out and get a job and apply yourself, you're really not in the real world. You're really not learning. So, my advice to younger kids out there, my advice to my kids would be the same. And I made James go work, particularly in the food service industry, due to my passion, but also because it's a business that is really difficult. You've got to manage usually a challenging kitchen staff, you challenging patrons, right? In a busy restaurant, you got to get through them. You got to deal with their special orders, and then they also worked with bartenders. So you've got three constituencies you constantly have to manage. My advice, I put them through that, and I'll tell you, they worked at the Palm in East Hampton, and it's a challenging job, but they're better for it. Better men, better able, as I mentioned before, to multitask, great work experience that they can apply later in their careers or early in their careers. So it's food service is just, again, back to being a passion, but to the young kids, you got to get in the game. You have to experience it. And, it's never easy. I go back to when I first wanted to break into media. It was really difficult. It took me almost 2.5 years to break into Turner.
Tell me about that path. The 2.5 years.
Yeah.
What were you doing during those 2.5 years?
So I was, on my way out of college, looking for a job like every young individual, and I started out selling door to door long distance, Jack, taking my beater and driving it to business parks all over New Jersey. And then it took me to Chicago, Anaheim. You would pull into office parks and just basically be told to leave. Don't you see, no soliciting? You have to break through the barriers and convince people very quickly. But I was doing that concurrent with trying to get my break at Turner. And in those days, and probably still to this day, it's the hardest part of breaking in is that first job.
Why? What appealed to you about Turner? Why were you targeting the media industry, first of all, and then
Yep.
also Turner?
It's a good question. In high school, I wrote a paper on TED. And I was kind of smitten with Ted and what he was doing at the time. And, those days, cable was just beginning. I believe ESPN, MTV, CNN all kind of launched in that same 1980s period. And it was fascinating to me. News, music, and sports. And you could get it 24/7 and not have to wait till those windows. So I just was fascinated with Ted. I had an uncle who worked at CBS. I think you two worked together. His name was Tom Leahy.
Tom, it's funny you're mentioning the passion to go into Turner. I had a similar passion coming out of the Newhouse School at Syracuse to work at CBS because I studied Bill Paley and we'd done some work. And Tom Leahy was one of my mentors at CBS. My career, bless his soul, he was rose out of sales to become president of CBS TV, and while he was president of the TV stations, he helped elevate my career and do things that had not been done in the industry, raising someone who was a kid and giving me opportunities that were extraordinary. And so thanks for mentioning Tom. He is truly one of the legends, unsung legends of our business. So go ahead. Sorry about that.
And thank you for saying it. He's family, and I'm sorry he's no longer. But I will say, he took the time as his nephew to spend counseling me on how to break in. And he tried to help me, but by and large, I was convinced I was going to Turner. And I just kept hammering on Turner, obviously with his advice in mind. And I finally broke through. And I was, that was back, I believe, in 1989. I worked for CNN.
What was CNN like in 1989? What was kind of its status, its role, not just in the business, but in the culture and society?
It was before its time. At least from a marketing and advertising vantage point. What put us on the map were the ratings, which were unprecedented in cable at the time, with the war. Our coverage of the war was groundbreaking. and game changing for CNN.
Wolf Blitzer under the table reporting.
Well, Bernard Shaw, John Holloman, I believe those are the three that were there covering, and that was a game changer. And there, Turner just began to blossom and expand from that moment forward. So it was a good run. I was with CNN in Los Angeles probably 3 years, and then the call came, if you want to get into leadership, you need to come back to New York. So I did that. I thought it'd be over a year. It was over a month. And then ultimately, fast forward a little further, I got the call to move up to Cartoon Network. We were starting the network. Ted had just bought Hanna-Barbera, and he said, just go start a Cartoon Network. It was that simple. So we did. It was an interesting moment because I went
quite a move from news to Cartoon Network to Scooby-Doo.
That's what I always said, Jack. You stole my line, but yeah, I went from Larry King, and Lou Dobbs to selling Scooby-Doo and the Jetsons. But I'd say, as I look back, it gave me an entrepreneurial spirit, even though we were still inside of a larger company, a growing company. I started to understand that building businesses was a core competency for me, and it's what got me up every morning. It's what got creative juices flowing, and it drove me.
Before we jump to that progression that bring us up to today, who was leading CNN and Turner and Cartoon Network at the time in sales?
When I first got there, it was John Barbera as our president. But the two names that really, at that period of my career, that stood out, as you'll recall, is Joe Yuba and Larry Goodman. I mean, they were the guys who they were the drumbeat, if you will, behind driving CNN at that point. Of course, their careers expanded across all networks over a period of time. But by and large, those are the two. But there are other people who were just really important in my career, too. And I take that a step further and say Mark Lazarus was my boss for a little while. Fantastic guy, done very well. And now, David Levy,
top 3-4 people at NBCU, running all
no doubt,
as well as a number of other businesses there. Mark, who else? There were a lot. I know there were a lot of leaders.
Well,
coming.
I mean, you're saying the mentors, the people who inspired me. I'd say David Levy certainly was in that group. I still speak with David. David's done extraordinarily well. I mean, I think he had a 28-year run with Turner. I mean, that's extraordinary. But you think about all the other people who are still out there, like Steinloff running now Discovery.
Matter of fact, we just published my Legends and Leaders conversation with John, and
I watched it start to finish. Jack, it was great. High bar set. So I hope I can live up to it. But Linda Yaccarino was there at the time. So there's no shortage of industry leaders that came out of that group at Turner in those years.
So you left Turner. What was the next step?
CNN led to Cartoon Network, which led to General Entertainment, co-managing TBS TNT with Linda. And then there was a moment in my time where I'd spent 14, almost 15 years there, and I wanted to do something a little different, right? I was missing those years of building the Cartoon Network. And I wasn't as interested as I could do it, and I think I did it fairly successfully, but it didn't drive me as much as finding a pocket of opportunity to become an entrepreneur again. Take a business from stage 1 to stage 2 or 3. And I met Alfred Liggins, who is now the CEO of Urban One, and he was a radio guy.
I really want to drill down into that
Sure.
a bit, Keith, because first of all, it says a lot about you personally. It says a lot about our community, but I'd love to hear not only your perspective of what that role was and responsibilities were, what you learned and what you saw that helps inform the realities that we're managing today as we're really working hard to bring more diversity, inclusion, and belonging into our community.
Yeah, look, diversity matters, clearly. Voices matter. And what I learned at Radio One was kind of the polar opposite of what a lot of people experience. I was one of few white people inside of a large Black media organization. And, I embraced that fully, and it was about the opportunity and about the people that I really love.
What are your recommendations? You talked about pipeline and that it's there, but what about keeping people in the industry? What do we need to do better?
I mean, I think it goes for everyone, all young people today. I think the answer would be the same. We've got to cultivate talent. We've got to create mentoring programs. We've got to create opportunity for people to grow in those careers, right? And in a COVID era, which we're living in, and I even see it with my son Jack, that connectivity that you have day to day with people is kind of lost. And I think we'll get through this, and hopefully it'll be by summer. But we got to get back on track with all young aspiring leaders, I think, by just inviting them in and making them feel a part of the company, the culture, and making sure they feel connected to the mission, continual training, mentoring, and make sure that they feel part of the fabric of the organization. I think that goes for all human beings. And I just don't think we do a good job, period, of that in the industry, particularly today because of COVID, but this will end.
So you're CRO at Altice USA. Altice is a French company. You can tell
Right?
us a little about it,
Sure.
as well as covering A4, and we'll drill down a little more into the realities of your day to day. But in that context of mentoring, supporting young people as they're coming into the industry, can you talk a bit about what you're doing practically at Altice?
Let's start with what Altice is. And Altice is, yes, a French-based company. Altice USA, we're based in Long Island City. There's the big green building that you used to see that said city, now says Altice. We're all over the city, but that's basically home base for us. We're a connectivity company, right? We're no different than the Comcasts of the world, the charters of the world. We just have a footprint that resides predominantly on the East Coast in the New York DMA, right? So what we are at our core is a connectivity company. Am the CRO of the news and advertising organization, which is a content and advertising and data company, right? So we've got hyper local assets, we've got regional, and we also have national assets. And my teams oversee all three. It spans everything from analytics to data, and to programmatic to addressable, linear, you name it, we do it here in one way, shape, or form. And I think what I was brought on to do is make sure we do it not only better, but we work collaboratively, not only inside of the organization, but inside of the industry. And I think in 15 short months, we've shown that we've made significant progress in that area. But there's a long way to go in some areas, and we've actually done really well in short order in others.
And tell me where you see the television business from the aspect of linear, OTT, CTV, streaming, evolving.
TV needs to catch up to digital. Digital really transformed our industry because it created a one-to-one relationship between a marketer and a consumer, right? And TV had always been a one-to-many. So what TV is trying to do is convert to be from a one-to-many medium to a one-to-one medium. And you hear about all these tactics like addressability and streaming. It just basically is allowing us to get to a household level, right? And be able to target that household as digital has been since its inception. So, we're lagging as an industry. We've made tremendous strides in some areas, but we as an industry have yet to kind of coalesce as one, right? There are a lot of different opinions, different boards and organizations that are rowing kind of in the same direction, but not together. So there needs to be a moment in time, which I hope, Jack, is sooner rather than later, whereas we are, working more collaboratively as an industry to really get to that moment in time where we're all using the same language, leveraging the same data, leveraging the same technology to drive outcomes for advertisers. And we're just not there yet. I think we're making positive strides in pockets. And we could talk about those individual pockets where we're seeing initiatives moving forward down a path, but it's not a singular path. It's bifurcated. You've got one group going down to the left, one group going to the right, and they're all trying to solve this for the same outcome. If we could just get everyone to sit in the same room, and drive to the outcome we're all looking for, which is getting back to be a growth business, I think we'd be in a lot better place 5 and 10 years from now.
What's your message to that individual who owns the budget to start paying attention to what's happening in the addressable TV and overall video space?
I'd say it's efficacy over efficiency. I think procurement has gotten into our business. I'm not going to say ruined it. It's challenged it. I think when you're a brand manager, when you're an agency and you're investing on behalf of the brand, when you bring a $35 CPM to the market, they're like, I can buy inventory for $5, and that doesn't make sense. There are different values to a $5 property and a $35 property. It should not just be about price. It should be about why is the 35 or 7x matter? What is it doing different than the 5? Can they be complementary? And I would say they certainly can be. But how do you leverage them together? And then the other thing I'd say is, and which is something we're doing extremely well right now, is our reach extension properties. So you've got buyers at an agency buying linear, and they're buying connected TV. How can we help them with set-top box data say, okay, you reach this household with a certain amount of frequency. It could be 0 exposure, it could be 5 exposure. How do we use connected TV to increase that reach, right? And those households that actually weren't exposed or exposed very little to your commercial message, how can we use connected TV to embellish it? And that's going to cost a little bit more, and it should. So you shouldn't try and make those two things, which do very different things, at the same price point. It doesn't make sense. So there's this constant conflict and friction in the industry, Jack, where we just value efficiency over efficacy, and we've got to move past that point.
Keith Bowen, CRO of Altice USA. Thank you for joining me, and thanks for this great conversation at Leaders and Legends. You too are setting a high bar for others. So thank you. And for all of you watching today, you can go to MediaVillage and just search at meetingprep.com for Altice or A4 or Keith Bowen, and read all about it, and watch all of my Legends and Leaders interviews at legendsleaders.org. Keith, thanks for joining me.
Jack, thank you. It's always a pleasure. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you.